A billionaire sheikh walks into a room of 50 elite candidates, Harvard graduates, Oxford scholars, children of CEOs. He asks one question in ancient Arabic. Complete silence. Then, from the back corner, a voice answers perfectly. Everyone turns around and freezes. It's the maid's daughter, wearing her mother's only dress. What happens next will shock you, because the sheikh's real test wasn't about the right answer. It was about something nobody saw coming. The crystal chandeliers trembled as Sheikh Rahman al-Mazrui entered the grand ballroom. Every eye turned toward the billionaire oil magnate whose wealth could buy small countries. Tonight, he wasn't here for business. He was here to choose someone worthy of managing his international charity foundation, a position that would control billions in humanitarian aid. 50 candidates stood in perfectly pressed suits and designer dresses. Harvard graduates, Oxford scholars, children of diplomats and CEOs. They'd spent months preparing for this moment, rehearsing answers, polishing resumes. Among them, barely visible in the back corner, stood 17-year-old Layla, wearing her mother's only good dress. A simple navy blue outfit her mother had worn to clean the sheikh's palace for 15 years. Layla shouldn't have been there at all. When the invitation mistakenly arrived at the servants' quarters instead of the main offices, her mother had laughed it off. But something made Layla open that envelope. Something made her show up. Sheikh Rahman raised his hand. The room fell silent. Then he spoke, not in English, not in French, but in classical Arabic, the ancient dialect his grandmother had taught him as a child. Tell me, his voice echoed through the marble halls, what is the true measure of wealth? Blank faces stared back. The candidates shifted uncomfortably. They'd prepared for questions about economics, management, leadership. Not this. Not in a language most of them had never studied. Someone coughed. Another checked their phone nervously. The silence stretched like a chasm. Minutes ticked by. The sheikh stood motionless, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with an expression that revealed nothing. Some candidates whispered to each other in panic, hoping someone nearby might translate. A woman in an expensive pearl necklace stepped forward, attempting to answer in modern Arabic, but the sheikh gently shook his head. Her accent was wrong, her words clumsy. This wasn't the language he'd asked for. In the front row, a young man from a prestigious banking family cleared his throat. He'd studied Arabic in college, earned top marks even. He began to speak, but his words came out stilted, textbook phrases that sounded hollow in the vastness of the ballroom. The sheikh listened patiently, then raised his hand again. The young man fell silent, his face flushing with embarrassment. Layla felt her palms sweating. She knew she should stay quiet, blend into the background like her mother had taught her. Servants' children didn't speak unless spoken to. They certainly didn't address men of power. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, warning her about stepping out of place, about reaching beyond her station. Yet her grandmother's voice was louder. The woman who taught her that knowledge was the one treasure no one could steal, that words carried power beyond gold. Around the room, candidates began to lose composure. Someone near the front asked loudly in English whether they could use translation devices. Another suggested the sheikh repeat the question in a more accessible language. A few had already pulled out their phones, frantically typing into translation apps, but the classical dialect was too ancient, too nuanced for algorithms to capture. The sheikh's assistant, a stern man in a black suit, stepped forward and whispered something urgent, perhaps suggesting they move on, restart the interview in English, salvage what was becoming an awkward disaster. But Sheikh Rahman waved him away. His expression remained calm, almost serene, as if he had all the time in the world. As if this moment of collective failure was exactly what he'd expected. More whispers erupted. Some candidates exchanged frustrated glances. They'd flown in from London, New York, Dubai. They'd canceled important meetings, prepared extensive presentations. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. This felt like a trick, an impossible puzzle designed to humiliate rather than evaluate. The energy in the room shifted from nervous anticipation to barely concealed resentment. Layla watched it all unfold, her heart racing faster with each passing second. Then, from the back of the room, a soft voice responded in perfect classical Arabic. True wealth, ya Sayyid, is measured not by what fills your vaults, but by what fills the bellies of those who have nothing. It is counted not in gold, but in the tears you dry and the burdens you lift from shoulders bent by hardship. Every head whipped around. Layla's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd spoken without thinking, the words of her grandmother, the woman who'd raised her in a refugee camp before they found work in the city, flowing naturally from her lips. Sheikh Rahman's eyes locked onto her. He moved through the crowd, which parted like water before him. When he reached Layla, he studied her face, not with judgment, but with something resembling wonder. You speak the old tongue, he said, still in classical Arabic. Where did you learn it? My grandmother, sir. She was a teacher before the war. She said our language was our identity, and even if we lost everything else, we must never lose our words. A smile touched the sheikh's weathered face. And what is your name, young one? Layla, sir. My mother cleans your palace. Third floor, east wing. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several candidates exchanged smirks. A maid's daughter? Here. The absurdity of it seemed to amuse them. The woman with the pearl necklace let out a small, incredulous laugh. The young banker crossed his arms, his expression shifting from embarrassment to irritation. They'd spent years building credentials, networks, reputations, and now they were being upstaged by someone who shouldn't even have been allowed past the security checkpoint. But Sheikh Rahman didn't seem to notice the crowd's reaction. His attention remained fixed on Layla, his eyes searching her face, as if reading a book written in a language only he understood. He took another step closer, and Layla instinctively stepped back, bumping into the wall behind her. She'd never been this close to someone so powerful. Her mother had strict instructions about maintaining distance, about never making eye contact with the sheikh during his rare visits to the palace. Your grandmother was a teacher, the sheikh continued in the flowing syllables of classical Arabic. What did she teach? Literature and poetry, ya Sayyid. She memorized 1,000 verses before she turned 20. She used to say that poetry was the soul's way of remembering what the mind forgets. The sheikh's expression softened further. And she taught you these verses? Every night, sir. While my mother worked late shifts, my grandmother would sit with me under a single lamp. We had no books. They were lost in the crossing. So she recited from memory. She made me repeat each line until I could taste the words, until I understood that language wasn't just communication, it was preservation of everything our people had been. Someone in the crowd scoffed loudly. A tall man in an Italian suit muttered something about nepotism, about the interview being rigged. His companion nodded vigorously, adding that this was clearly staged for publicity. The sheikh's assistant looked uncomfortable, glancing between his employer and the increasingly hostile candidates. Sheikh Rahman finally turned to address the room. though he continued speaking in classical Arabic, his voice carrying a weight that demanded respect. Does anyone else here understand what this young woman and I are discussing? Silence. A few candidates looked at their feet. Others stared defiantly, as if the question itself was unfair. I ask not to exclude, the sheikh said, but to illuminate. The position I offer requires someone who can sit with refugee mothers and understand not just their words, but their hearts. Someone who knows what it means to lose everything yet hold on to dignity. Someone who understands that charity is not about giving from abundance, but about recognizing shared humanity. He turned back to Layla, switching to English so everyone could understand his next words. Your mother. She has worked in my home for 15 years. Yes, sir, Layla replied, also in English now, her accent carrying the slight roughness of someone who'd learned the language from television and library books rather than private tutors. And in those 15 years, has she ever asked me for anything? A raise? A favor? Help with your education? Layla shook her head. Never, sir. She says honest work is its own dignity. She says we earn our place in this world through our hands and our hearts, not through begging from those above us. The sheikh nodded slowly. Wisdom, he said, often lives in the most unexpected places. Sheikh Rahman held up his hand again. Second question, he announced, still in classical Arabic. A village has one well. It serves 100 families. A corporation offers to buy the well for enough money to make everyone in the village wealthy. Do you sell? And if not, why? The other candidates remained frozen. They understood bits and pieces, but classical Arabic was different from the modern version taught in schools. It was like comparing Shakespearean English to text messages. Layla stepped forward. No, Yesayid. You do not sell. Money divides when it enters a community. Some spend wisely, others foolishly. Soon the wealthy buy from outsiders while the poor go thirsty. But a well belongs to everyone equally. The poorest child drinks the same water as the richest elder. The well is not just water, it is unity itself. The sheikh's eyes gleamed. And if I told you that village was real, that last month I was offered exactly such a deal, then I would say you refused it, Layla replied quietly. Because a man who asks what is the true measure of wealth already knows that some things cannot be bought. A heavy silence fell over the ballroom, but this time it felt different. The candidates weren't just confused anymore. They were witnessing something they hadn't prepared for. A shift in power. A rewriting of rules they'd assumed were fixed. The sheikh circled Layla slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression thoughtful. You speak with certainty, but certainty can be dangerous. What if the village elders came to me, begging me to accept the offer? What if they told me their children were hungry, their roofs were leaking, their sick had no medicine? Would you still refuse? Layla's throat tightened. This wasn't a simple riddle anymore. He was testing something deeper, her ability to hold conviction when faced with suffering. She thought of her own childhood, the nights when her mother chose between buying medicine or food, never having enough for both. Then I would ask the corporation why they want the well. She answered carefully, her classical Arabic flowing with unexpected confidence. If their intentions were pure, if they truly wanted to help, they would build new wells, repair the roofs, provide the medicine, and leave the original well with the village. But corporations don't offer fortunes for things they intend to give away. They want control. And Yesayed, when you control water, you control life itself. The sheikh stopped walking. His assistant's eyes widened slightly. The first crack in the man's professional composure all evening. So you question the corporation's motives, the sheik said. But what if I am the corporation? What if I told you I made that offer, with genuine intention to help? The room seemed to hold its breath. This was dangerous ground. Layla could feel the other candidates watching, perhaps hoping she'd stumble, say something that would disqualify her and restore the natural order where Maid's daughters knew their place. But Layla had learned something from her years in the palace, watching from the shadows. She'd learned that powerful men respected truth more than flattery. Then I would say, respectfully, that you were wrong, Yesayed. Her voice remained steady despite her trembling hands. Good intentions paved with gold still pave a road to dependence. Give a village money, and you make them grateful. Protect their well, teach them to dig new ones, and you make them sovereign. The first creates gratitude that fades. The second creates dignity that endures. For a long moment, Sheikh Rahman said nothing. Then, to everyone's shock, he began to laugh. Not mockery, but genuine, warm laughter that filled the cavernous space. She calls me wrong, he said, switching to English, addressing the crowd. To my face in my own selection interview. She tells me I made a mistake. He looked at his assistant. How many of you, in all your years serving me, have had such courage? The assistant shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The sheik turned back to the crowd, his expression growing serious. Last month, I was indeed approached about that village. The corporation offered $20 million for water rights. I refused, exactly as this young woman predicted. But my own board of directors argued with me for weeks. They showed me spreadsheets, projections, economic analyses. They had degrees from the finest institutions in the world. He gestured toward Layla. She has a grandmother's wisdom and the courage to speak it. Tell me, which advisor would you trust with billions in humanitarian aid? The one who shows you numbers, or the one who shows you truth? The candidates exchanged uncomfortable glances. The young banker opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The woman with pearls stared at her expensive shoes. But courage without wisdom is recklessness. The sheik continued, his gaze returning to Layla. So I ask you this. Third question. What if you are wrong? What if your advice causes harm instead of good? One of the candidates, a young man from London, finally spoke up in broken modern Arabic. Sir, with respect, we weren't informed the interview would be conducted in classical. Sheikh Rahman turned to him. In this position, you will meet mothers in Syrian refugee camps, farmers in Yemen, teachers in Sudan. Many speak only Arabic. Some speak dialects older than your universities. If you cannot understand them, how will you serve them? The reality crashed over the room like a wave. This wasn't about business degrees or family connections. This was about something deeper. Everyone here looks impressive on paper. The sheik continued, switching to English so all could understand. But paper burns. I need someone who carries wisdom in their bones, who learned compassion not from textbooks, but from living beside those who suffer. The young man from London opened his mouth to protest further, but the sheik raised his hand, silencing him with a gesture that was both gentle and absolute. You prepared for an interview. I understand. You studied my foundation's financial reports, memorized our mission statement, researched my business ventures. This preparation shows intelligence and dedication. He walked toward the center of the room, his voice filling every corner. But let me tell you what happened 3 weeks ago. I visited a camp on the Turkish border. Thousands of families living in tents, children with no shoes despite the winter cold. I sat with an elderly woman who'd walked 200 miles carrying her granddaughter on her back. She spoke to me in a dialect so old, so pure, that my own translator couldn't understand half of what she said. The Sheikh's eyes swept across the assembled candidates. She told me about her village, about the olive trees her grandfather planted, about the school where she taught mathematics for 40 years, about the moment the bombs fell and she had to choose, grab documents or grab her granddaughter. She chose the child. Everything else, citizenship papers, property deeds, university certificates, turned to ash. Several candidates shifted uncomfortably. The ballroom's opulence suddenly felt obscene against the backdrop of his words. When she finished speaking, she pressed something into my hand. The sheik continued. A single olive seed. She'd carried it in her pocket for 6 months, across borders and through checkpoints. She said, "Plant this in soil that won't be stolen. Let something from my home survive." He pulled a small object from his jacket pocket, the seed, worn smooth by countless nervous touches. I asked her why she trusted me with this. Why not plant it herself? She said, "Because you listen in the language of my mothers. Because you sat on the ground beside me instead of standing above me. Because your eyes understood what your translator could not say." The sheik looked directly at the young man from London. "Your resume tells me you graduated with honors. It tells me you speak 4 languages. It tells me you manage a portfolio worth £50 million. Impressive, truly. But can you sit on cold ground with refugees and understand not just their words, but their souls? Can you recognize what matters when everything else is burned away?" The young man's face reddened, but he remained silent. Another candidate, a woman in a burgundy suit, stepped forward tentatively. "Sheikh Rahman, if I may, perhaps we could demonstrate our capabilities in other ways. Our understanding of logistics, resource allocation, crisis management. You want to prove your worth through skills I can teach," the sheik replied, his tone not unkind. "But I cannot teach someone to hear the language of loss. I cannot teach someone to value an olive seed as much as an oil deed. These things you either carry within you, or you don't." He turned slowly, making eye contact with different faces throughout the room. "Each of you comes from privilege. Perhaps not oil wealth, but privilege nonetheless. Education is privilege. Opportunity is privilege. Standing in this room is privilege. I don't fault you for this. I, too, was born into advantage. But the question is, have you let your privilege build walls, or have you used it to build bridges?" A man near the front, older than most others, spoke up. "Sir, with respect, how can we build bridges to experiences we haven't lived? Should we apologize for our education? For working hard to be here?" "No," the sheik said firmly. "Never apologize for what you've earned, but recognize what you haven't lived. Recognize that a girl who spent her childhood watching her mother scrub floors while memorizing ancient poetry might understand suffering in ways your textbooks never taught. That her grandmother, who lost everything but language, might have preserved wisdom your professors never mentioned." He gestured toward Layla, who stood frozen against the wall, overwhelmed by suddenly being at the center of something so much larger than herself. She didn't come here with confidence. She came with curiosity. She didn't come with entitlement. She came with humility. And when I asked a question in the language of her ancestors, she answered not with what she thought I wanted to hear, but with what her heart knew to be true. He turned back to Layla. Your mother worked for me? Yes, sir. 15 years. She's taught me that honest work dignifies the soul. And would she be surprised to learn her daughter just earned a full scholarship to university with a guaranteed position in my foundation upon graduation? Layla's eyes filled with tears. She would be overwhelmed, sir. As am I, Sheikh Rahman said softly, in classical Arabic once more. By finding someone who remembers that before we build empires, we must build character. The ballroom remained frozen as the Sheikh escorted the maid's daughter toward the door, leaving 49 confused candidates wondering how they'd studied everything except what truly mattered. Sometimes the greatest test isn't answering the question you prepared for. It's answering the question that reveals who you truly are. But before they reached the grand entrance, Layla stopped walking. The Sheikh turned to her, curiosity replacing the certainty in his expression. She was trembling, her hands clasped tightly together, but her voice when she spoke was clear. Yesayed, I cannot accept. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. The candidates who'd been gathering their belongings, preparing to leave in defeat and embarrassment, froze mid-motion. Even the Sheikh's assistant looked stunned, his clipboard slipping slightly in his grip. Sheikh Rahman's eyebrows rose. Cannot accept a full scholarship, a position that others would sacrifice years to obtain. Not cannot, sir. Should not. Layla's tears spilled over now, but she didn't wipe them away. My mother cleans your floors because she has no education. She does this, so I might have what she never did. If I take this gift, this enormous, generous gift, without earning it through the same path as others, what am I teaching myself? That shortcuts are acceptable. That circumstances of birth, even fortunate ones, replace genuine qualification. The Sheikh studied her for a long moment. Around them, the other candidates began to inch closer, drawn by the unexpected turn of events. The woman in the burgundy suit whispered to her neighbor. The young banker's expression shifted from anger to something approaching respect. You would refuse opportunity because of pride? The Sheikh asked, but his tone suggested he was probing rather than challenging. Not pride, sir. Principle. Layla wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so unpolished and honest that several people in the room felt their own eyes sting with unexpected emotion. My grandmother used to tell me a story. A poor man finds a bag of gold on the road. He takes it home, feeds his family, buys a shop. Years later, his son asks how they became prosperous. The father says he worked hard, but the son discovers the truth. Their fortune began with someone else's lost gold. The son asks, are we merchants or thieves who dress well? She looked directly at the Sheikh, no longer afraid, no longer remembering the gap between their stations. You honor me beyond measure, but I would rather earn my place through effort than receive it through chance. Let me attend university through my own merit. Let me work, truly work, to understand the Foundation's mission. And if, after years of genuine learning and service, you still believe I'm worthy, then I will accept with a clear conscience. The ballroom had gone completely silent. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. Sheikh Rahman's face remained unreadable for several heartbeats. Then, slowly, he began to smile. Not the polite smile of earlier, but something deeper, more genuine. He turned to address the entire room, his voice carrying a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Do you see?" he said to the assembled candidates. "Do you understand now what I've been searching for? Not someone who grabs at opportunity. Not someone who takes what's offered without question. But someone who understands that the manner of receiving matters as much as what is received." He placed a hand on Layla's shoulder, a gesture almost fatherly. "Child, you've just passed a test I didn't even know I was giving. Most people, when offered treasure, take it immediately, fearing it might vanish. You see treasure and ask if your hands are clean enough to hold it." The Sheikh's assistant stepped forward, speaking for the first time that evening. "Sir, if I may, the scholarship program does have merit-based entry pathways. We could arrange for Miss Layla to apply through standard channels, with a recommendation letter that acknowledges her skills rather than granting special privilege." "Perfect," the Sheikh nodded. He looked back at Layla. "You'll apply properly. You'll compete fairly. But understand this. When you sit for that entrance examination, you'll do so knowing that your character has already been tested in ways universities cannot measure. That knowledge alone should give you confidence." Layla bowed her head, relief and gratitude flooding through her. "Thank you, Yasayed. Thank you for understanding." "No," Sheikh Rahman said quietly. "Thank you for teaching an old man that integrity still exists in the young." If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.